Good evening, everybody. Tonight being Tuesday night, we have some questions have been sent in, so we'll endeavour to answer them and give you some support in your practice. So,
Dear Ajahn, does Theravada Buddhism have an equivalent of Mahayana's Ulambana festival, which is the time when devotees honor one's ancestors and relieve the suffering of souls? If not, does Theravada believe in such? How does Theravadan Buddhism relieve suffering of beings and honor ancestors?
It's hard to generalize, even within one group of Buddhists, what practices and beliefs there are. But for sake of generalization, in the Theravada Buddhist countries, yes, they have similar practices. So from my experience living in Thailand, which is considered Theravada Buddhist country, there's still a lot of influence from traditional Indian culture and Chinese culture. So on this day in the Vasa, the retreat, every year, this is the Ubosada day, the new moon, in August, last one of August. In northeast Thailand, they have a practice of making merit for the dead today. Involved also to do with the rice that's becoming ripe and is being harvested. They make special little rice cakes and offer them at temples. But the purpose is to make merit for one's ancestors and dead, making offerings to the Sangha. And then in 2 weeks' time, we have the same kind of thing in the Chinese community in Thailand, but also in other East Asian countries. They call it the day when they open the gates of heaven and hell and make merit for the dead. So if you're in somebody reborn in heaven, they wouldn't need the merit, but they can still rejoice in the merit being made. Somebody in a lower realm may need the merit, perhaps. That's the belief, and that's not disputed in Theravada Buddhism. And 2 weeks after that, so on about, I think, the 17th of September this year, the next new moon, there'll be the Thais open the gates of heaven and hell. So whoever's looking after the gates will be getting a bit tired at this time of year, because, there's today, there's 2 weeks' time, there's 2 weeks after that. According to Thai culture, Chinese culture, Northeast Thai or Laotian culture, but it means if you've been reborn as a hungry ghost in that part of the world, well, you've got a few different opportunities to collect your merit, and maybe that's a good thing. So the belief has descended from the teaching on karma, rebirth, Buddhist cosmology, that when people die, according to their karma, they're reborn, their consciousness re-emerges in different realms, sometimes as human, but sometimes heaven realms, sometimes what we call lower realms. And one of the lower realms is the Preta, or hungry ghost realm. And these various festivals are particularly aimed at sharing merit, making merit through doing good deeds, good actions, and then dedicating that to loved ones who have passed away, particularly those who may be trapped in a hungry ghost realm. Particularly from the Buddhist commentaries, and that's Theravada commentaries as well as Mahayana, and the Abhidhamma, there is the teaching that hungry ghosts are in a realm where they can receive merit when it's shared with them or dedicated to them by humans who make offerings and do good deeds, good actions. Particularly one class of Preta, or hungry ghost, what's that? Parawattu Jivaka Preta, I think, is the one that can receive merit in particular. So the the practice has become established in Theravada Buddhist countries as well as Mahayana, and there are other days as well. We have in Chinese tradition there's Chengmeng, beginning of April. There's a number of occasions where Buddhist families particularly will come together to make merit for their ancestors. You'll see here every night we chant, we just did, sharing merit. And who are we sharing merit with? Well, with all classes of beings and ancestors and virtuous leaders and our preceptors and teachers, all kinds of people. So if you're practicing regularly, you might well be regularly sharing merit. But some people get caught up in their life, making a living, earning a living, doing many things. So most Buddhist cultures will have particular days where you come together. That's the custom. You come together on that day to make merit, specifically to share with the dead. So yes, it is practiced in Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, and probably in many other religions, or just people who have some confidence in the fact that there is such a thing as rebirth, and that the good we do can help in this life and in future lives.
Dear Ajahn, when taking the 8 precepts, do we need to take them verbally, or is just mentally thinking okay? Also, what are the allowable foods after midday? Thank you.
A very smart practitioner checking up on what's allowed before taking on the 8 precepts. It's a bit like you're going on you bought your air ticket to go and you check what's on the menu. To undertake to keep the 8 precepts is certainly a very meritorious, a very good thing to do. It's a training. It's particularly a training in renunciation, and particularly the last 3 precepts are emphasizing that, simplifying one's consumption of food by restricting it to just in the morning, simplifying one's consumption of sense contact, you might say, how much one is abstaining from music, dancing, shows, entertainments, wearing makeup, perfume, jewelry, a lot of these sort of external things which are not so necessary for the practice and are maybe more part of culture and society as a whole, but are not necessary when you're keeping the 8 precepts, dedicating yourself to the practice. And also not sleeping on a high luxurious bed, just sleeping on a simple bed that promotes wakefulness. And these last 3 precepts are really supporting the practice and training of the mind in meditation, in mindfulness, developing samadhi, developing insight. So usually you go on retreat, whether it's in a meditation center or in a monastery, you might keep the 8 precepts for that period of time. Or some people decide to take the precepts, undertake them for 1 day a week, for example. You think about it, once a week you keep the 8 precepts for a day and a night, which is a very common practice amongst Buddhists. That's 4 days a month, 52 days a year. So in about 7 years you'll have completed 1 year of keeping the 8 precepts. So you can see how your experience just with keeping the precepts can build up quite a substantial body of experience through time. Just one day a week already adds up to a lot. In a lifetime, could end up many years of keeping the 8 precepts, even if it's only 1 day a year, or 1 day a week. So when one does take the precepts, traditionally one comes to a teacher, say in a monastery or a temple, and does it as a ceremony, reciting as the teacher gives the precepts. That's a skillful means, particularly for someone who's new to the practice, just to help them focus their mind, resolve to undertake those precepts. So if it's done with a witness, a teacher, you tend to it has more meaning. You try harder, you commit more to keeping the precepts, because they're training rules that you undertake voluntarily. Nobody forces you. And it's easy sometimes for your mind to stray from your precepts. You forget, you get provoked or tempted out of your precepts by different situations. Or maybe just get distracted and give them up through distraction. There's a number of reasons you might not keep the precepts. So if you at least begin by having a resolve and do it in front of a teacher or with a teacher, that helps to make your mind quite firm, brings up the samadhi and the firmness of mind. But if you've done it regularly, well, you may not need to do it as a ceremony, saying the words with a teacher. You may be at home or in a monastery, but you just silently to yourself, or in front of a Buddha statue, for example, you might recite the precepts and undertake them for a day or a period of days. And if you're doing that regularly, you're practicing keeping the 8 precepts regularly, you might get to the point where you're just practicing them and you're so familiar with them you don't need to recite them to yourself or to anyone else. But they become training rules that you stick to and use as a standard for your behavior. And sometimes you might lose awareness and break a precept, so then you have to go back and establish them with yourself. Or if you feel you really need it, you go back to the teacher and re-establish them. That's another way. So the verbalization of the precepts can be helpful. Just as a little exercise, once a day you reflect, have I kept my 8 precepts today properly, fully? If I didn't, why not? And you're learning from your behavior, learning your weaknesses, learning where your attachments, your cravings are strong. And that the keeping of the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts is a training that you learn from. And over time, you're developing the qualities that those precepts promote through your behavior. And you'll find they get easier to keep, to the point where you maybe don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just natural for you to keep the 8 precepts. Just as a monk starts off learning many rules of the Patimokkha and additional rules on top of that, hundreds of rules. At first it can be challenging, and tonight on the Apposita we recite the Patimokkha rules to remind us what they are. But there may well be times in your early monastic life where you forget rules, or you're confused in how to keep them. So you're constantly coming back to your rules, re-establishing them, becoming mindful, becoming aware, and learning from your experience. But it gets to the point maybe where it's just natural. You're just naturally following the monastic discipline without anyone else's pressure or your own pressure. You just do it because you become used to it. So, for example, not killing. You're living in the forest, it's very easy to be in a situation where you're tempted to kill an ant or a mosquito or some bug or something that's around you. And it happens often. But if you're regularly keeping your precept, you're bringing up the intention to refrain from killing or harming even small creatures. That intention becomes established, and then you no longer think about it. It's just second nature not to kill, to solve the problem of a bug or a creature in some other way that's non-violent. So that's the aim, to practice to the point where they're just established in your behavior and they're quite easy to keep.
Dear Lung Pa, yesterday during meditation, my mind went into a contemplative mode. It picked up clinging as the topic. I was able to see that we cling to all the contacts through the 6 sense bases. It felt like it was all weighing down. Then it occurred that the true refuge is found in mindfulness, or the knowing. I went back and forth in the contemplation. Tears came to my eyes. May I ask, is this experience revealing the truth of the true refuge?
It certainly sounds like a very good experience. Maybe the fruits of your effort of practicing mindfulness, developing mindfulness, practicing restraint, with sense contact, which also requires mindfulness. It's called Indriya Samvara. So not only when we meditate, but in daily life, one who practices meditation and is cultivating the path will be developing this quality of sense restraint, and becoming much more aware of sense contact, how much and what type of sense contact one wants to indulge in or allow to take place. And you can't always control these things, but you'll notice if you're practicing meditation, say anapanasati, breathing meditation regularly, particularly if you practice at the same time or more or less the same time every day, you start to get a very good measure of your mind, where it's at on that particular day, and particularly what you've been doing through the day, where you've been, what you've been involved with, will have an effect on your state of mind. So when you sit down to meditate, what you've been doing in the immediate preceding period of time, that day, that afternoon, that evening, will tend to have an influence on your state of mind, and you'll see that straight away. So most people find it takes a little time for your mind to settle down when you practice meditation. Unless you're very skilled and you've maintained your mindfulness prior to your meditation session, it takes a while just to settle down, bring your attention to the present moment, to the breath, stick with it. And a lot of that is the effect of previous sense contact. We're stirred up. We've seen things, heard things, tasted things, smelt things. So when are the times where it's hard to have mindfulness, restrain the senses, be aware, be clear? Well, say you go to a social event in the evening where there's food and drink and chatter and maybe music or whatever. Then you were to go and meditate after that. The sense stimulation will have been quite significant, and so your mind will reflect that. And often in the beginning of our meditation, we're not so skilled yet. You feel overwhelmed by the sense contact because mindfulness is easily pushed aside. It's like the senses bring in all the data, all the information, the sights, the sounds, and the mind can't maintain mindfulness and process it and reflect on it with wisdom. So it just gets overwhelmed by it, and we feel tired, or we feel not very happy in ourselves because we can see how we're stirred up by the sense contact. But it can also lead to some wisdom where you see the problem, the danger of sense contact, and you're understanding how pleasant sense objects attract us, and we get caught into wanting more, more nice sights, sounds, more nice tastes. Or unpleasant sense contact tends to be giving up, creating aversion, and you want to get rid of it, stop it, block it out. And you'll see all that going on in meditation, so that helps you to understand a bit better what's going on and motivate you to practice mindfulness more diligently, not only in meditation but in daily life. And you're seeing the truth that your sense contact and receiving sense objects through our 5 external senses, and then the 6 is the mind itself. It's tiring. It can be burdensome. It's tiring having to keep seeing, keep hearing, tasting one object after another. And especially when we're not very mindful, it has a powerful effect on the mind. The mind gets tired, it gets confused, it reacts with craving and attachment. So whenever you do establish more mindfulness, you start to see that process in your mind. Maybe experiences some detachment and some peace from the detachment, sees maybe the impermanent nature of sense contact, so get some insight into impermanence. And when insight arises, it's a relief for the mind and a release from this kind of being a slave to the senses and the reactions to the senses. So when one experiences relief, joy can arise, the mind and body relax, the mind becomes more peaceful, joy can arise, and sometimes that brings with it tears of joy, tears of letting go of sense objects and sensuality and seen some of the more refined states of happiness that come from samadhi, seeing that more as a better way for the mind to develop. It draws you on to want to practice more. Even if you're not skilled in meditation, it gives you that impetus you want to carry on. So this experience you've described, it's quite a good one, and it's a sign probably that you're on the right track. Keep practicing and keep establishing mindfulness, and particularly reflecting on the impermanence of sense contact. I think that's a way you might find you get more insight.
The next question is a two-part question. Dear Ajahn, when a person is having depression to the extent of having hallucinations, for example, hearing voices, can we do dana offerings on their behalf to lessen their suffering, even without them knowing?
Well, you can always do that, yes. On behalf of somebody who's mentally ill or depressed, someone who's sick, physically sick, someone who's stressed, we can always do that, and people do that. Maybe when they're making offerings with Buddhist monks, they often dedicate the goodness of that offering to a particular person, or sometimes just generally to all beings, and particularly people who are suffering everywhere. We can dedicate meditation to others. We meditate for a while and share the merits of that with someone. We can keep the 5 or the 8 precepts for a day or many days and dedicate that to somebody. So even if that person doesn't know, it might partly depend on your karmic connection with them, how strong it is. So if it's a family member or close friend or someone you spend a lot of time with, well, it may subtly, in a way that's difficult to really explain in common terms, but it might subtly affect that person in a good way. Certainly it should affect us in a good way, because we're developing kindness, compassion, sensitivity and well-wishing towards others, and particularly the person who's suffering. And maybe subtly it can affect them. I mean, one other option is to make merit in some way and then actually tell the person. Whether they accept what you tell them, what they do with that when you tell them, depends, and that may depend on the situation, the relationship, but you can tell them, and some people do that as well. Having made merit for someone, later on when they meet them, they say, I made merit for you, and just leave it there as just passing on the news. How much it will help that person, obviously if someone is seriously ill, hallucinating, hearing voices, they most likely need medical help, or maybe counselling, medication and so on. That's almost certainly part of the treatment, but the goodness that comes from our practice and associating with someone like that may be able to help as well. There are going to be many factors that help that person to deal with their situation. As long as we don't have unrealistic expectations, all things take time, but we certainly can share merits with people who are suffering.
And the second part, what else, as a friend, can we do to help lessen that person's depression if they are not a Buddhist?
Well, probably number one is just be a good friend to the person. If they are already your friend, you've got a connection, or just maintain that friendship in a supportive way. Even if you have very little knowledge, medical knowledge, or knowledge of the condition of being depressed, anxious and so on, being a friend can simply mean just being there, spending time with the person, giving them importance, giving them warmth, showing your patience, tolerance for them, because they may find their experiencing all kinds of moods and behavior that makes them kind of antisocial to others, so they may not have many friends or anyone to talk to. So if you are willing to do that, that can be a great thing for them. And you might not have to say much at all. It's maybe just listening to them, spending time together, doing things together with a sense of caring. That might be the most powerful thing. There may be other more skilled professionals or caregivers, counsellors who can lead them in recovery as well. But your support is perhaps the most vital thing, just nourishing them with goodwill in whatever way you can. You know, there's no quick fix for these things, so, you know, giving wise words of wisdom often doesn't work, may even put them off. You know, when you empathize with someone, maybe there's not a lot you can do in terms of words. You can't really explain to them or tell them because you're not really speaking from your own knowledge or experience, unless you have been through it yourself perhaps. But you can listen to them and just be supportive and do things together. That can be a very healthy, nourishing thing. When I was young, we had I knew a family, quite close friends of our family, and when they had several children, and when one of the sons left school, he immediately went into depression. And I never really thought or knew why on earth would that happen. I wasn't aware that there was any traumatic or abusive or difficult situation he'd been through. And there may be things I didn't know about, but it seemed to happen kind of by itself. And this friend, he went into depression and he'd hardly speak. He was always very kind of grumpy. If you did talk to him, he'd always say something very negative, so it was very difficult to be with him and talk to him. But his mother just did her job as a mother. You know, I felt sorry for her because she was at the age, all her children had become adults. They had either gone on to further education or started work, and then there's this one who was an adult but needed care, and so she dedicated a lot of her free time to caring for this son, being with him, looking after him. So she was tired and probably a bit sad that this has happened just as the time when she thought he would be becoming an adult and going off getting a job or whatever. But she just stuck with him year after year, looking after him, being his friend, because a mother's love, you know, has no limits. And I saw that it had a very good effect. She'd just take him with her, you know, go shopping, he could carry the bags, come and visit friends. He'd sit there, he wouldn't say much, he'd obviously be unhappy, but it's better than just staying at home in bed or sitting around doing nothing. So sometimes just caring for somebody, being with them, can do a lot, especially on a continuous basis. Tolerating them, being willing to be with them when maybe other people aren't. Seen that even with monks. Occasionally monks become depressed, seriously depressed. I remember one at Ajahn monastery became depressed, didn't want to meditate, didn't want to do anything. He just kind of gave up. Possibly it was, you know, a mental illness stimulated from earlier events in his life, but had come out being a monk. Ajahn was quite skillful with him. He allowed him to relax the rules that didn't matter too much, not the strict discipline of a monk, but little things like, say, Ajahn would sometimes be offered a newspaper, and we never got to read the newspaper. You know, that was worldly stuff, no need to read the news and see all that. But this newspaper, he wouldn't read it much either, but it would sit there. So when this monk was around, he'd give him the newspaper to read. He'd say, oh, go and read that. And the monk would sit there for an hour or two, just reading the newspaper. Occupy his mind, give him something to do. And you know, we only ate one meal a day in our bowls once a day. Ajahn allowed him to have 2 meals a day, before midday, so still keeping the monk's rules. But he relaxed our 1 meal of the day rule so he could have 2. Just give him something to do, have an extra bit of food, like a treat. He didn't have to come to the meditation sessions, chanting sessions. So he was given a lot of support to just relax, be at ease. Nobody was telling him what to do, even though he wasn't doing things he should have done, but they're allowing him a little bit of flexibility and freedom like that. And so he did improve a bit while he was a monk. Eventually he disrobed. Perhaps he wasn't suited for the monk's life. And good news is, eventually he got a job in a bank, and he got married, and he came back to visit us, and everyone was very happy to see his progress. I believe he still had medical help as well, but his life got back on track. So sometimes it can work if you just give a lot of kindness, care to someone. Over time it can help. But often it is a long-term thing, so you have to be ready for that and be patient with the situation.
Dear Luang Por, is it right view to see everything that happens to us as karma? If so, how best to use karma as a guidance to help us with our everyday struggles?
Well, the Buddhist teachings do make the understanding and reflection on karma, the law of karma, puts it right at the center of what we're doing. But at the same time, the Buddha didn't say absolutely everything that happens in our experiences are karma as such. I mean, there's different levels or different ways you can look at it. Once you've been born, you can say, well, that's the result of your past karma, having made the karma, created the attachments of in past lives, then you become to be born in this life. So birth is the karmic fruit of last life. And once you're born, a whole lot of things are going to happen. And you're going to get old and sick and die and experience many things in this world. So part of what happens to us is just the karma of being born. But having said that, the Buddha pointed out, well, there's other laws at work in the world as well, which are not just karmic based. So there's like what we call the law of Utu, which means like temperature, weather. So, this morning it was very cold. You wake up and it's cold. You could say, oh, it's my karma for coming to live in the Yarra Ranges. The mornings are colder than they are anywhere else. You could say that, but at the same time, the actual cold air is generated from, it's just temperature and the sun, where it is in the time of the year, the season, what's happening with the winds, the rain. All of these things are being controlled by the laws of physics and weather and temperature and evaporation of water and all those sort of things, which are not but karma. They're not karma. They're just happening anyway, whether we're here or not. Or there are some things that happen in life which are not karma, like the biological laws. Why you have earth and you plant little plants or seeds in the earth and they grow up into bushes and vegetables and fruit and trees. A tree looks nothing like the earth that it grows out of, but it happens, doesn't it? You have seeds and different ways that plants generate, and they grow, and that's going on. That's not karma. That's again, you say, well, I live in the forest. There's a lot of trees here. It's my karma for choosing to live in the forest. Okay, but the actual way the forest is growing, well, that's just biology. That's nature. So the Buddha pointed out, some of the experience we have as human beings is the effects of just these natural laws going on. But in terms of practice and freeing ourselves from suffering, karma is right at the center of that, and that is where we should be studying, learning, reflecting from our experience. And to cut a long story short, karma is generated by intention, or we say volition, the will. So you have a thought, it's generated in the mind first, and then you put that thought into action. Maybe it's just a series of thoughts, and you can make mental karma, good and bad, or put it into speech, or put it into action. And good karma is rooted in skillful mental states, skillful intentions, in short, non-greed, non-anger, non-delusion. So generosity, kindness, wisdom, mindfulness, and many other skillful mental states lead on to skillful karma being made when we develop them, bring them up. Unskillful karma leads to suffering for ourselves, for others. So that will be greed, selfishness, anger, hatred, confusion, jealousy, all kinds of more negative mental states. When they arise and we hold on to them, we develop them, we follow them, then we start making negative or bad karma on the level of body, speech and mind. And that's something you can look at and learn from every single day, every moment that you're alive. You've got the opportunity to prove whether the Buddha was saying, speaking the truth or not. It's not something you just believe in. Maybe in the beginning you take it as a belief, but over time you're proving it to yourself through your actions and observing and learning over and over again, to the point where doubt maybe is pretty much dissipated, and you start to use it as a skillful means in your life. To avoid causing yourself and others suffering, you avoid making bad karma. To bring benefit to yourself and others, you consciously make good karma. And so it'll start to inform and lead your whole life, the way you make decisions and choices and do things. And of course karma, the deepest karma is habitual and really deeply ingrained into our consciousness. So like little seeds, and they're constantly sprouting, so you have to be on the ball, because often we don't realize the karma we're making until it's too late. Sometimes it's very fast and you've said and done something that you regret later. But you can even learn then, from the painful experiences we create and the suffering we create, we learn afterwards and say, well, I'm not going to do that again, or I'll do it differently. So it's a constant learning process, but particularly what is good, what is bad. And of course the best karma is the karma that leads to the ending of karma, which is this Eightfold Noble Path we're studying and practicing, which leads to Nibbana. So the enlightened one, the Arahant, makes no more karma, even though they're still receiving some of the fruits of their old karma while they're still alive. So, teachers we believe to be enlightened, like Ajahn Chah, he still got very sick at the end of his life. He had 10 years of quite unpleasant, physically painful and uncomfortable sickness to go through. And so everyone was speculating, what karma was that? He's such a good man, did so much good for the world, how come he had to have this karma? And then people would have their theories, true or not, we don't know, but somebody said, he was an army general in a past life, and so he'd done a lot of good, protecting the country, protecting everybody, but at the same time, as a general, he'd lead people into war and people would die, so he made karma, and this has come back and he's had to have this terrible illness. That's speculation. But the best karma is the karma that leads to the end of karma, and arahants, they will have still some pain, difficulty go through. Not everyone will like them, not everyone will treat them well, they'll have illness, pain. But when that's finished, when they die, there's no more karma to be experienced, and while somebody's an arahant, they're not making any more karma, so there's no more birth, no more suffering. So we consider that the best kind of karma to make is the karma that leads to the end of karma.
The last question this evening is, Dear Lungpa, Panchupadanakanda is translated as the 5 aggregates of clinging, or the 5 focuses of identity. What is upadana here? Is it Nandi Raga, Chanda Raga, or Sakaya Ditti? With thanks and metta.
Nandi Raga, I think, usually translated as delighting in, isn't it? Chanda Raga is like wanting, desiring. So that would really be considered craving. A good one to read, you read the teaching, either an explanation or a sutta on the paticca samuppada, the teaching on dependent origination or dependent arising. And when you're going through the 12 links in the chain, it's like a process of how we end up suffering as human beings. You know, craving, this is in the middle of those 12 links. Craving arises dependent on feeling. So when we have sense contact, it always brings with it a feeling, pleasant, painful, or neither pleasant nor painful. Based on that, craving arises. So Nandi Raga tends to be delighting in the pleasant, that which stimulates lust, and sensual desire. So, you know, nice, pleasant sight, sound, taste, smell, touch stimulates Nandi Raga. What is the most stimulating thing for Nandi Raga is probably the physical body. We have desire and lust for this form, our own form. We like it. We look in the mirror. Maybe when you get as old as me, it's no longer so much desire. But especially when you're younger, at your peak, at your prime, then it's quite desirable, and in the form of others. So, you know, what makes the world go round? You know, sexual desire is underlying a lot of our behaviour as human beings. It is Nandi Raga. But craving and Raga and Nandi Raga hardens and starts to condition the way we think about ourselves and the world and what we cling on to. So then you get clinging. So craving is the cause for clinging in this teaching on the paticca samuppada. This word upadana is usually translated as clinging, but sometimes as fuel. So if you look at a fire, say, Nandi Raga is throwing more fuel on the fire. Say, I like this, throw that on. So the fire gets bigger. The craving leads to more attachment, more clinging. The clinging gets firmer in the mind, in your mental makeup. There's 4 kinds of clinging. There's clinging to sense objects, sensuality, clinging to the practices, our beliefs and the practices we do, our customs, cultural conditioning, our external practices. So that might include keeping precepts, meditating, but clinging with a certain blind attachment and view. And then upadana is also just basic attachment to views and opinions on things, but in a blind way, where one is just blindly clinging without mindfulness or insight, not recognizing a view as something that's still impermanent, not self, but just clinging to it. So it might be the view, so you might have Nandi Raga based on something you like. I like ice cream. I like being a human being so I can eat ice cream. So that becomes part of who you are. So you start developing the view, I like ice cream is good for me, ice cream is something that is good in the world, we should all have ice cream. Maybe it'll lead you to go on protest marches in favour of more ice cream, for example. So it starts to condition your whole view and outlook of the world and who you are. And the last kind of clinging is the clinging to the sense of self, atawada upatana. So I am somebody who is strongly in favour of ice cream. If you want my vote, you've got to give me ice cream. Whatever way you're looking at life, I need ice cream. If that's your particular clinging and the way you're inclining that way. So your Nandi Raga is hardened into a firm view and a firm sense of self, that clinging to ice cream and the view that ice cream is good, that's who I am, and that becomes what we call becoming, bhava. Becoming is like your whole identity is now formed around ice cream. It may form around many other things as well, but just for example, ice cream. And that will mean everything you think, do and say is revolving around that kind of craving, clinging and becoming. So you become a connoisseur of ice cream. You know where you can buy it, where the best ice cream is, the best shop, the best recipe, the best country. When I was little, I went to Italy once and I remember telling my mum, they have the best ice cream. that becomes your world, the world of ice cream, in the process of creating suffering. And it's suffering because, well, you can't have ice cream all the time. Maybe it leads you into conflict with other people. My ice cream's better than yours, or I need to earn money to buy the ice cream. Or disappointment when your ice cream is finished because it's temporary, the pleasure is gone. Or you get your ice cream and you're afraid that you're going to lose your ice cream and get angry. That's life, isn't it? That's one little tiny part of the clinging to the aggregates, maybe ice cream, but you expand it to everything else and it follows the same kinds of patterns. It leads to rebirth. A good rebirth, born in a place where lots of ice cream is available. Bad rebirth, maybe you're too stingy with your ice cream and you kept it and you never gave any away, you never practiced generosity with anyone, never made any merit, so you're reborn as a hungry ghost. Back to the first question today. And they say hungry ghosts, they have these tiny little mouths and big bellies, and they can never get enough food in to feel full, so they always feel empty. So maybe if you've been too stingy and clinging on too much to your ice cream, you become a hungry ghost and you're always walking around, I want ice cream, but you never get it, you're never satisfied. It's a great state of suffering. I'm joking about it here, but you can see life is that it goes in that way, doesn't it? If you're not mindful, you're not reflecting on your experience, well, craving leads to clinging, leads to becoming, leads to more birth over and over again, and the whole process becomes reinforced, and it creates a lot of suffering. Why do people fight and compete? Why do people get jealous and envious? Why do people get sad, angry? Why do people act in selfish, greedy ways? It's because of this chain of craving, conditioning, clinging, conditioning, becoming. And the root cause of it all is ignorance. Not knowing the truth, not recognizing what's going on. So we get caught into an endless pattern of behavior that supports more craving, more clinging, and then more ignorance, more not knowing, and things get worse. So the benefit, the blessing of the Buddhist practice is the Buddha recognized what's going on and said, look, it's like this. If you practice, develop more awareness, reflect on this, you'll start to see what I'm talking about. You can free yourself, however long it takes, from the effects of craving, clinging, becoming. You can actually free yourself from stress in this way by developing this understanding. And that's what we do when we practice the precepts, we practice generosity, we're practicing mindfulness, developing insight, practicing vipassana. You're interrupting this process by which craving and attachment is leading to suffering. And you little by little, you're rolling it back. So the amount of time in the future you're going to suffer will get less. The more mindfulness, the more insight you have. So every moment of mindfulness is like a blessing for you, because it's like interrupting the process of craving, attachment, becoming. Every insight into impermanence, the impermanence of ice cream. You say, if I have it, I don't have it, it doesn't matter, it's impermanent anyway. And your mind lets go. Clinging is something to be let go of, then you'll suffer less. You may still get ice cream or not, but your mind is no longer clinging, no longer craving. You've seen the impermanence of it, and you let go. So, I'm kind of simplifying everything here, but that's what we're doing in our practice. We're learning to recognize craving, clinging, becoming as the cause of suffering, and letting it go. And the one who's let it go completely is the enlightened one. And they have no more craving, clinging, suffering, no more problems. So that's the end of tonight's session. So thank you for listening. If anything was useful for you, that's good. If it wasn't, well, we can talk again next time. So we'll leave it there for tonight.